We're delighted to be able to welcome our keynote speaker, George Finney, the Chief Security Officer of Southern Methodist University, best-selling author of Project Zero Trust and well aware. A little bit about George. So, as a Chief Information Security Officer, he holds a firm belief that people are key to solving our cybersecurity challenges. In addition to being the author of several best-selling cybersecurity books, including the award-winning book, Well Aware, Master of the 9 Cybersecurity Habits to Protect Your Future, George worked in cybersecurity for over 20 years and has helped startups, global telecommunications firms, and nonprofits to improve their security posture. So George is going to take us through today for the next hour, hacking your brain for better cybersecurity. So a round of applause for George.
Thank you, Andrew. What's up, Houston? I'm so excited to talk to you here. I love working with FutureCon, but I'm a Dallas guy. I love coming to Houston. I know, I'm from Dallas, right? It's tough. So I'm here today to talk to you about my favorite subject. So my day job is I'm a Chief Information Security Officer. I work for Southern Methodist University. By night, I have a side consulting practice where I've thought a lot about security awareness, and particularly around the issue of people. So I started this journey about 8 years ago, in part because anytime I worked with a social engineer, we hire them occasionally to walk our campus, I always felt like they understood the inner workings of other humans better than I did. That bothered me, and I think as a community, our security practitioners need to know how people work even better than social engineers. So I started taking a deep dive into the things that were already working, things like corporate wellness programs. That's where we came up with the name Well Aware Security, and that's why we called the book Well Aware. We're bringing together the techniques that we already know work in organizations in terms of wellness programs, and we're bringing security awareness to that. So I did a really deep dive into the psychology and neuroscience of behavior change. We're going to get into a lot of that today. But really, I think that's really the most important part of everything that we do as security practitioners, right? We help protect people. When you talk to CEOs, what do they say? They say that people are the most important part of our organizations. So if we keep saying the same thing we've always said in cybersecurity, what do we always say? We say people are the weakest link, right? That's our unofficial motto of our entire industry. So first of all, it's wrong. People are the biggest attack surface. People are on the front lines, but also we've got to align and understand how our organizations work. And if CEOs think that people are the most important part of their organizations, and you come into the room and say people are the weakest link, we're not going to talk together, right? So we're going to do a deep dive. But really what security awareness should be about is about behavior change, right? Helping our communities, the people, from an accountant to a doctor to a lawyer, how do they become more secure versions of themselves? So I'm really excited to talk about it, but we're going to start at the very beginning. I like to say that everyone's heard of Abraham Maslow. He created this pyramid, right? If you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, water, and shelter, right? Those are the most important things. We're not thinking about being successful in our organizations if we're hungry. That's the foundation of who we are as people, as humans. But a part of that foundation is also security, safety and security. If you feel insecure in your home, in your community, at work, you're again not going to be able to achieve your highest potential as a human if you're worried about safety and security. So this is Pam. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Pam, not her real name. Pam, she's a faculty member that I work with. She's got multiple PhDs. She's written more books than I have, which is saying something. But what Pam told me is, George, I'm so gullible, I'll fall for anything, right? How many of us know someone like that? That's who they think they are. That's their identity, right? So Pam's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and yet she believes that she's gullible. How am I, as her security leader, going to ever help her be successful at changing her behaviors if that's who she thinks that she is? So we're going to come back to Pam a few times throughout the presentation, but in the book, Well Aware, it's kind of like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, if you've read Stephen Covey. I think there are 9 cybersecurity habits when it comes to cybersecurity. So the first 4 habits, literacy, skepticism, vigilance, and secrecy, those are all things that we do inside of ourselves when we're working on our own, maybe on a project deadline or sending an email. The final 5 habits are all things that we do when we work with other humans, right? So culture, diligence, community, mirroring, deception, right? Those are all security habits that we can develop over time, but those all involve working with other people. So those are the external habits. So I've changed my approach a little bit over the years as a CISO. In working with folks like Pam, I really needed to change my perspective, right? So I've never been the kind of CISO that pounds his fists on the desk and says, no, you can't do that. But again, as I've changed my approach, thinking more about how humans can help us be more successful in our cybersecurity programs, I started to think of myself a lot more like a coach. So I've studied great coaches throughout the years, whatever sport, multiple sports, and all of the best coaches. So you've probably worked with a coach at some point in your life. Maybe it was an athletics coach, maybe it was a leadership coach, but the best coaches all have one thing in common. They all help you find your unique inner hidden strengths. Right, your football coach, if you're a football fan, maybe you're a sprinter, right? Maybe that's your unique given talent. If I go try out for the football team, and I'm very proud of my SMU Mustangs for winning the championship this year, right, if you're a walk-on and you're a sprinter, where are they going to put you? Wide receiver, maybe cornerback. Where are they not going to put you? Not on the defensive line or the offensive line where the guys weigh 400 pounds and can bench press 1,000 pounds, right? So guess what we do in security? We expect everybody to be perfect at everything at all times. We don't recognize those individual strengths that folks can contribute to the team. And as we coach them, as we build them up over time, again, if you're a sprinter, what am I doing for you as a wide receiver? I'm giving you practices and drills to develop those capabilities. I'm helping you work on plays to, again, get better with your unique strengths, because guess what? You're a part of a team. You're not on your own. But we treat people as though they're really the only link, right? That's how we think of people. So I've kind of developed a different approach. And I'll walk through how we develop this program. I start with a cyber personality test. Y'all can feel free to take it or not. It works either way. If you take it, it's about 5 minutes of answering questions. There's 22 questions. At the end, you can sign up for my newsletter or not. That's totally fine either way. I don't sell your information. But really, let's go back to Pam for a second. Pam doesn't believe that she's a skeptical person, right? She thinks of herself as being gullible. And maybe that's true, but maybe for Pam, all her friends know that she's a vault, right? They can tell her any secret, and she keeps that safe, right? Maybe secrecy is really her internal strength. For me, I'm a cybersecurity explorer, which means my inner habit strength is vigilance. My external habit strength is diligence, right? So as a CISO, I'm always on the lookout for new potential threats, new vulnerabilities, That's my vigilance habit. And I'm always coming up with plans to deal with those new potential vulnerabilities. That's my diligence habit, right? I'm collectively bringing people together to do tabletop exercises, to have discussions about vulnerability management, and bringing those people to the table, right? But notice, I'm not perfect at everything. I need to surround myself with a team that can represent all of those habits, right? We want to bring all of those strengths out of all of the unique individual contributors that we have on our different teams. And so if Pam were on my team, working on a particular project, say, I would want to focus her role specifically to her, right? What are her inner strengths? And I'd want to create a coaching program that helps her develop those strengths. So that's what we're all about. So I've done some team assessments for folks. This particular company, this was their security operations team. So in the picture, the 4 quadrants are the 4 internal habits. The 5 rings are the 5 external habits. But you can kind of easily see at a glance, this particular team, again, I mentioned their focus on operations. It made total sense that they were so heavily represented in the vigilance quadrant. But guess what? They weren't just represented there. All of the different areas were covered. I think all of the different habits are covered by this particular team. And so you might ask the question, well, is this the ideal makeup? Well, it depends. It depends on what your team needs to accomplish, right? What are your individual goals? Maybe you've got a new product coming out and you've got to have some security team members on that team. That's cool. Who else is on the team, right? Are you building a product that requires a lot of secrecy, right? Maybe you want to focus that team around that secrecy, clearly defining folks' roles according to their individual strengths. I worked with one CISO in Dallas, and she had a bunch of folks in the literacy quadrant, and she said, "George, is that wrong? What does that mean?" And as I went through the things that literacy was about, right, knowing your environment, understanding the potential risks of the types of software you use, where is your data, right? As I kind of described that, she's like, "Oh my gosh, these 5 people in the literacy quadrant are all my GRC team," right? It makes total sense that's where they would fall. But I think understanding the human element of our teams is incredibly important. And so why do I start with identity? I start with identity because that's who we are, right? We know from the behavior change research that you have to believe that you're the type of person that can change in order to change, right? If you're quitting smoking, you've got to believe that you can quit to quit. If you're quitting other things or starting to exercise, right? What's the advice that we give to people? If you want to start working out, you got to go to sleep with your workout clothes on. You've got to have your running shoes by the bed, right? But it starts with believing, right? And again, I think if we think and tell people that they're the weakest link, that's going to disrupt their belief that they can grow and change, right? We need to think about it differently. I like to say people are the only link. People are the only link in our organization, right? We know 95+% of breaches happen because of the human element. I think they're the only link. They're the only chance we have at being successful. We've got to help them believe that they can be successful as a prerequisite for success. Now we get to the hacking your brain portion of the conversation. So there's been a ton of research into psychology and neuroscience around habits over the last decade or so. So obviously there's my book, Well Aware, but you might have also come across James Clear's Atomic Habits, or BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits, Charles Duhigg's Power of Habit, right? And they all kind of reference slightly different research. They all use slightly different terminology, but they all agree that there's a 3-step habit loop. So the older research suggests that, well, maybe it takes 21 days to form a new habit. I mean, you've heard it takes 21 days. It's not exactly true. Other people say it maybe takes 90 days, maybe takes 6 months. But really, it's about this habit loop, right? How focused are you on this habit loop? How are you reinforcing that? You can create a habit in less than 21 days, potentially. So prompt, that's the cue in my brain that tells me to do a behavior. Then there's the behavior itself. Then there's the reward that tricks my brain into releasing endorphins so that the next time I see that prompt or cue, I'm going to go ahead and do that behavior because my brain's already craving that chemical release. So, concrete example, I'm about to go to bed. I know when I'm about to go to bed, I'm going to brush my teeth. That's the behavior. And the reward, right? We can't sleep on the reward. This is the most important part of this habit loop. The toothpaste companies have realized just a little tiny chemical additive to make your tongue tingle is enough to release that endorphin rush in your brain. And you're going to, next time, okay, I need to go brush my teeth. I want my mouth to feel that tingly, minty, fresh sensation. We can use this to help our employees get better at cybersecurity, right? We don't have to accept that security awareness has to be about just checking the box, right? It can be successful. So we take this habit loop approach and we apply it to each of the 9 cybersecurity habits. So for literacy, right, literacy is about understanding your environment. The technical definition of literacy isn't that you know everything already. It's that you can recognize the words on the page. You have enough of a foundation to be able to string concepts together. And that's really what we're about when it comes to literacy. We want to give people the foundation to understand the things, to have the resources to go to a trusted source when they have a question to find out something. So the way this works, prompt, we have to select a prompt that aligns with the frequency of the behavior that we're trying to recommend. So in this case, we recommend people check their credit scores. We don't need to do that every day, and maybe we'll set up alerts to review that proactively. But probably once a month is the right cadence for that. So after I pay my bills, presumably you pay your bills at least once a month, you'll know, okay, I'm going to go check my credit score real quick and make sure there aren't any fraudulent new loans that have popped up in my name or whatever. And then again, we want to align the reward with this particular behavior, right? So the research shows that when you align a reward with the behavior that it's connected with, in this case, there's a financial element of this, that's going to accelerate the behavior change learning curve. Make sense? So if literacy was learning to read, skepticism is not believing everything you read. Again, we want people to be able to question things, right? We want to create that kind of culture in our environments. For years, I resisted personally using a password vault, right? I had my password algorithms or whatever, but over time, I probably have hundreds of different passwords. I have to help my spouse with her passwords sometimes. We have shared accounts. I have a young child, so she's got now school accounts that I've got to help her manage, right? So it was too big of a project for me to just take a whole weekend away just to adopt my password vault. We want to break this down into bite-sized behaviors, right? Again, we want to help influence that habit loop. So breaking it down, when I click login, if for whatever reason I don't already have this in my password vault, it's going to pop up, and that's my cue to go ahead and add that password to my password vault. Break it down into a tiny behavior. Make it repeatable. And again, I love Reese's peanut butter cups. Probably not the best thing to do on a frequent basis, eating candy, but again, whatever reward works for you in your unique environment, right? So too often in cybersecurity, we'll give what I call bulletproof cybersecurity advice, right? So I tell you, never write your password down. And then when you do it, when you come back to me, you're compromised, and what do I tell them? I told you so. That doesn't really help build relationships. People don't like hearing that. So instead, this recipe-based approach helps us meet our people in the middle, right? It helps build it into their lives, the unique way that they live their lives, the unique kinds of people they are. So again, we don't want this one-size-fits-all approach because we might have a single mom who is in accounting. She may live her life very differently than a bachelor in sales, right? We have to have security training that works for both of them, and this is the coaching-based approach that we're taking. So vigilance I think of as a focused skepticism, right? We're on the lookout for threats that we've seen before. So I know you didn't really come to a cybersecurity conference thinking that you would hear about meditation, but actually your brains aren't static, right? So we've all heard kind of the idea that if I lose my hearing, maybe my other senses will grow more sensitive, right? If I go blind, my hearing might get better. That's because our brains aren't static, right? They change. It takes about 2 weeks for your brain to remap itself. It's remapping itself all the time. So the research around meditation shows that the actual size of your amygdala inside your brain will actually decrease in size. Your prefrontal cortex will actually thicken. The net effect of that is you become less irritable, I guess, and so you're less susceptible to things like social engineering, right? That's what the bad guys do. They want to make you panic in that moment. Your amygdala governs the panic response. Meditation, even just doing it for a few minutes a day, just a couple of times a week over the course of about a month, will have drastic physical changes of your brain itself, right? Which can help. Again, vigilance very much aligns with the size of the amygdala, the limbic system, which we'll talk about in a second. That really does have an impact when it comes to cybersecurity, right? We don't think about all of the things that impact our humans, right? Lack of sleep can drastically impact the way people perform. All of the big life events that you might go through, right? If you've got folks going through a divorce, right? We need to have empathy for our team members, our employees. This is really helping to reinforce that process, right? We want to meet them where they are. The final internal habit is secrecy. Secrecy is a natural part of the human experience. I think of it as the dividing line between that which should be public and that which should be private. And so, again, as a technologist, I've kind of slept on this idea of locking your computer, right? We all can enforce policy in our organizations to lock our computers automatically. I include this particular recipe because I think I was missing an opportunity to help reinforce people's identity around security, right? Just something as easy as pressing Control-Alt-Delete or Windows L really does help, right? Reinforce that it's something so easy, it's low-hanging fruit. I can start to build my momentum as someone with a newly focused identity around cybersecurity, right? We want to help build them up so that they're able to do the more challenging things later on. Now we're transitioning to the external cybersecurity habits. I think one of the most important external cybersecurity habits is creating a culture of cybersecurity. So we've all probably flown on an airplane over the years, right? What's the first thing they do when you get on the airplane? Right, the stewardesses walk through and they say, okay, here's where the emergency exits are. Somehow maybe you can use your cushion as a flotation device. I hope I never have to do that. What would the impact be if we did something similar, right? The airlines are reinforcing the idea that they value your safety and security with that. We all kind of tune out, right? But we're still getting that message that they care about your safety and security. If we as security teams helped maybe prep our department heads across our organizations to start a meeting out by spending the first 60 seconds talking about something relative to security, right? Again, these are group recipes. So I call this the security minute, but at the beginning of a meeting, practice the security minute and then have shout outs to the team for doing, having an impact on cybersecurity. Really could change the culture of a lot of our organizations. Diligence, again, I mentioned diligence. This is one of my strengths when it comes to cybersecurity. But again, I think of diligence as the plans and procedures we put in place around security so that we're prepared. So I'm dating myself a little bit. In the 80s, there was a thing called random acts of kindness. There's been a lot of research into random acts of kindness, actually. It turns out if you practice random acts of kindness, it really does have an impact on your overall happiness as a human. And I like the idea of being able to practice random acts of cybersecurity. The trick was, though, in these studies around the random acts, was that they weren't actually random. So they asked people to keep a journal, and they planned for finding opportunities to practice those random acts the day before. So if you keep a journal, write down one security goal for the next day. Maybe if you see somebody's computer unlocked, you'll say something about it. Maybe you can look for an opportunity to introduce your security minute in a meeting. But again, let's make this a repeatable process. So when I wrote the book, I started talking about the 9 cybersecurity habits, and someone stood up in the audience and they were like, okay, 9 cybersecurity habits sounds awesome, but 9 is way too many. I'm never going to do all 9. Okay, cool. Just give me one. If I only had to practice one, which is the most important cybersecurity habit? And that most important cybersecurity habit is community, 100%. The biggest, strongest caveman in the world was still vulnerable for at least a third of their lives because they're sleeping or incapacitated in some way. Community, right, is the reason that we come together as a species. Right, we come together for mutual protection, not because we really like each other or get along all that well all the time. Community is the way we keep one another safe. And community when it comes to cybersecurity, right? How many of us are members of an Information Security Advisory Council? The FS ISAC, the RAN ISAC, right? Health ISAC, the Retail ISAC, right? There's so many of them today, right? We share our information. That's why you are here today, is to hear the stories of one another, to hear what's going on, how can I protect my organization better? You're already practicing the most important cybersecurity habit, right? Think of how you can operationalize that in practice, right? Make it a habit to keep doing. Don't just be a member of your ISAC, participate in the ISAC. Do you have a company-wide ISAC that you can invite people into and participate with? So mirroring is a really interesting one. We as humans, so it turns out when I did the research for the book, I reversed engineered all of the tips and tricks we give in cybersecurity. I have this spreadsheet with hundreds of entries in terms of advice, like never write your password down or never write never use social media. And every one of the 9 habits that we kind of distilled these down into actually maps to a very specific part of your brain. And with cybersecurity mirroring, there's a part of our brain called mirror neurons. They describe this as humans are wired for empathy because of these mirror neurons, right? So I'm sorry, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, but remember last season when Dak Prescott broke his leg, right? And they played that replay over and over and over again. Every single time, I felt that physical pain watching his leg get broken. That's your mirror neurons at work, right? It's a fundamental thing of who we are as people. It helps us understand the intentions of other people, right? Using our mirror neurons, we can have empathy for one another. And again, we already do this in our cybersecurity training, right? We teach people to Google themselves. We teach people to look at their social media profiles from an anonymous perspective. We do it in our security teams. We have penetration testers that look at our organizations from an external perspective. That's what mirroring is all about. How do I do that as an individual, right? We want to build that habit. If that's your strength, right? I love the approach of, hey, let's find your strengths. Let's have a custom training program built just for you to focus on building your strengths first, and then escalate the degree of difficulty over time after you've kind of built that identity and attached that low-hanging fruit. The final habit is deception. So I have this thing, when my daughter was 4, we were driving through a restaurant, and they always asked for your name at the restaurant, so they know they got the right person on the right order. And she's in the back seat, and she leaned forward, and she was like, "Dad, give them a fake name." I'm like, all right, well, whatever. They don't care who you are. And she realized, even at 4 years old, that people in a crowded restaurant, at Starbucks or wherever, didn't need to know my real name. She realized the baristas or whatever didn't need to know my real name, and in fact, maybe it makes us more vulnerable if we're not using deception. So again, making that a habit for us, every time we go, right? That's the cue. I give them the fake name. I actually have to give them a different fake name every time. I can't just keep using the same fake name. So you've got to keep track of that, right? And the reward, I know what the reward is for me. It's spending time with my daughter and building that connection. For her, it might be the hit of the French fries driving home. But whatever that reward is, right? Maybe it's a snack. Maybe you can binge watch The Office. But help reinforce that idea of man, that's who I am. If you're one of the folks with deception as your inner habit, like, gosh, let's figure out how to build my strengths up there. So why do I? Oh, we got a little video here. We'll see if is there audio? Let's try that again. Well, we'll skip the video for now, but the idea is our training kind of brings these concepts together. Happy to share, do a demo. This particular video is on YouTube. So why do I focus on habits? So this is a concept for neuroscience called the triune brain theory. So the triune brain, there are three parts of the brain. The neocortex is what makes humans the smartest animal on the planet, right? The size of the neocortex relative to the rest of the brain is really important. So for us as humans, in terms of power of the neocortex, right, it's incredibly powerful. We can come up with a theory of relativity with our neocortexes. But in terms of speed, it might take us a lifetime to come up with a theory of relativity. Actually, it only took Einstein 26 years. That's how smart he was. But as you go down the brain, evolutionarily speaking, when you get to the limbic system is where emotions are in the brain. It's also where decisions are made. So, sorry, we don't actually make decisions rationally. We make decisions based on feeling, and then we justify it with our neocortex. But what they found is scientists think there are probably only 6 or 8 primary emotions that we experience. So in terms of power, in terms of bandwidth, right, you've got 8 things that part of your brain can think about. In terms of speed, how fast do you know how you feel about something? Right, really, really fast, like basically instantly. So a lot of our security programs have tried to make security awareness personal for people, right? We've tried to establish that personal connection. That's moving our security training down from the merely logical information that we give when we just check the box to, okay, I'm going to make it personal. I'm going to make this have some feels to it. As you go further down, the reptilian brain is where habits lie. So there's actually a super fast network inside your brain that helps keep you alive. It's a fear-based network. This is where the cyber criminals act, right? So they know that fear works to trick them into giving their passwords or clicking a link. This is why we need to focus on habits to get even faster. So they put some subjects into an MRI machine, and they showed them an image for just 2/100ths of a second, which isn't long enough for your conscious brain to even know that it's been presented with an image. But already, your brain started that fight or flight mode to keep you alive when it saw a scary image inside. That's why we've got to make habits a part of our security programs, right? In terms of power, right, we've got these recipes. We've got to like work to get them programmed into our habit system. But in terms of speed, again, they're faster than we're able to consciously respond to. It's really important. So some people out there have said, George, this is cool and all, but security training doesn't work. So there's some great research out there that suggests that humans are better at problem-solving skills in the morning versus the afternoon. And the degree of difference in performance is as though you had consumed the legal limit of alcohol. Right? I know we're about to have happy hour in a couple hours, but think about that difference in performance. So they've studied this in a number of areas, right? So if you have to go schedule that next certification exam, schedule it for the morning, not the afternoon. The same students taking the same tests perform better. If you have to schedule a doctor's appointment, if you don't take anything else away from this presentation today, right? If you have to schedule a doctor's appointment to go have surgery, schedule it for the morning versus the afternoon, because doctors find more issues and make fewer mistakes in the morning versus the afternoon. It's not just because I'm tired in the afternoon. It actually has to do with the hormone cortisol level in your system. It builds throughout the day. And so I was giving this presentation to some folks at MIT, and one of the researchers, a PhD professor there, jumped out of his seat, and he was like, "Oh my God, George, your graph here is the same graph." He was a postdoc on the research that actually looked at the cortisol levels in your brain. So this chart, I've professionally sent over 30,000 simulated phishing messages in my career, and over the course of 8 years, I had all the data. So I thought, this probably has an impact on cybersecurity as well. And so I could show over time my users were 8 to 10 times more likely to click on a phishing message in the afternoon versus the morning. It's not just because they're tired. It's because of their cortisol levels in their system. And guess what? The bad guys know this, right? Anecdotally, just like any great marketer, they know the perfect time of the day, the perfect time of the week to send that message. They're targeting you. This is why, anecdotally, we feel like 4 o'clock on a Friday is like the worst time in cybersecurity. It's because of that cortisol level, not just because people want to get out the door and move on with their weekend. But, right, remember my statement, if you believe that security awareness training doesn't work, you got to explain this right here, right? People are listening. People are able to identify red flags in phishing. The green line was real phishing messages that we received that were reported to our help desk, recorded in our help desk ticketing system. Our real non-simulated phishing messages, our users report by 3x more in the morning versus the afternoon. So now that we know we're biologically more vulnerable in the afternoons, what are we going to do about it? Right? We've got to be able to do something about it in the afternoon. I think habits are part of the answer. I think frowning is another part of the answer. Why do I say this? How many people have heard the advice, if I smile for 30 seconds, I can trick my brain into releasing endorphins and actually make myself start to feel happy, right? It's true. This is one of the most researched topics in all of psychology. So if you go back and read the original paper that tried to examine this, so smiling had an impact on the brain. So they figured out that our facial muscles are directly wired to the older parts of the brain. And so smiling really does have an impact on whether you feel happy or not, but frowning in the original paper also had an impact. So if you frown for 30 seconds, it actually makes your brain wired to be more vigilant. So think about evolutionarily why that might be true. If you're in a crowded room and all of a sudden everybody starts frowning, right, the messages that your brain starts signaling is like, oh my gosh, am I in danger? Am I in danger? Oh, I'm gonna. So the research suggested that you would be approximately 40% more vigilant. And so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna test this. They for some reason let me experiment on my users. I work at a university, so I created a control group, and I trained a group of folks to frown while they were reading email. Right? Okay, this sounds crazy. I know, right? So as it turns out, I sent the people volunteered for this. I gave them free vacation days to spot the daily simulated phishing message. My control group got a separate vacation day, by the way, than the frowning group, just so it was fair. But the folks that I trained to frown while they were reading email, what do you think happened? Show of hands. Did they click fewer links or not? Man, we got some skeptics in here. Okay, like 5 people believe. So the other 100 people in the room, y'all all believe like frowning didn't matter. Okay, so actually, as it turns out, 43% is the number. The same phishing emails, same time of day. The group of folks who frowned while they were reading email were 43% less likely to click on a phishing message. Right? Frowning is free. You don't have to buy that from any vendors. But what really blew my mind was, again, it was a game, right? I played. It was kind of like the Biggest Loser when you lose weight competitions. It was the Biggest Fisher. We gave people points not just for not clicking, but also for reporting the messages. And I didn't expect this, but the group of folks that frowned while they were reading email reported those phishing messages at 3x the rate than their non-frowning counterparts. So think back to the afternoons, right? Would that have made a difference, right? You can tell people, well, George said if I just take the afternoon off, we'll be more cyber secure, but maybe frowning is another option there. I like to say that culture eats cybersecurity for breakfast. So there's a great leadership coach. His name is Peter Drucker. He coined the term culture eats strategy for breakfast. He's studied hundreds of companies across the world, and he's seen these executives come in, and they've got these great visions for what they hope the company will be able to do. But those visions fail, those strategies fail because they don't take into account the culture of the organization. They didn't have empathy for the employees that would actually be doing the work of fulfilling those strategies. I think culture also eats cybersecurity for breakfast. And so I thought, again, okay, how would I show whether this is the case or not? So it turns out Glassdoor has a culture ranking when you rate your former or current employers. And so I looked at all of the companies that were breached in 2018 and cross-referenced their Glassdoor rankings. And it turns out that companies that had a lower than average Glassdoor ranking were 3 times more likely to have been the victims of a data breach. So I'm going to bring this home and make it personal a little bit. In higher education, right, our faculty members get tenure, which means they usually can't be fired for most any reason. And so we had a victim fall victim to a gift card scam. It's a couple $1,000s that they lost for their department. And it was an admin assistant in this particular department. And I like to interview folks that have been impacted by this just to hear, right, was there anything we could have done differently? Could we have had better training? Could we have communicated better? Could we have sent more messages? And she was like, you know what? I was 99% sure this was a scam. That 1%. Her boss, a faculty chair, who has tenure, he's the kind of person that throws things, that yells. She said, you know what? If it was a 1% chance, but if it was that 1%, he would have made my life a living hell for the rest of the year. If this was really from him, right? Think about that. Culture eats cybersecurity for breakfast. We're not necessarily the chief culture officers in our organizations, but we can make a difference. We can have an impact. So I think that the difference between an amateur and a professional isn't necessarily because the professional gets paid to do the work that they do. So the example I give, remember Shaquille O'Neal, famous basketball player, right? Back in the 90s when he was playing for the Lakers, right? They had this thing, and I like to reference this because it has the word hacking in it, but there was the Hack-a-Shack. Anybody know what the Hack-a-Shack was? Right? Shaquille is like 7+ feet tall. He's a monster. If he got anywhere near the goal, he could just dunk it. So what opposing teams would do is, as soon as he got the ball, they'd foul him. When Shaq went to the foul line, he wasn't very good, and he'd usually miss both free throws. The Hack-a-Shack, the perfect defense against one of the best professional basketball players of all time. So what did Shaq do? Shaq's a pro. Shaq came up with a plan. What did he do? Every offseason, for a couple off seasons, he worked on his free throw shooting. He didn't get perfect at free throw shooting, but he got good enough so that they stopped doing the hack-a-Shaq. I think that's where we're at in cybersecurity, ladies and gentlemen. I think we can get better. We don't have to be perfect, but I think we can get good enough to help with our cybersecurity challenges. I think security is in our DNA as humans, and I thank you all for listening to me talk. Thank you. Any questions? We've got a mic in the back.
I could be wrong, but listening to you, it looks like you made a deliberate attempt to look at risks within the information space, focusing mainly on what I'll describe as humanistic approach, focus on behavior. Many people within your space, whether CISO, CIO, that have been in contact have taken a little bit of a different approach, focusing on technology and tools that would be put in place to kind of do some kind of preventative measures. So what is it that actually drove you to take this different approach to focus on human behavior as opposed to technology drivers?
So great question. Why focus on people rather than solve all our problems with technology? That's an awesome question. I at the time, it occurred to me, right, as I became more and more technical, right. That's the progression most of us take in our career is in technology, in cybersecurity, right. We start out like, oh my gosh, how does a subnet even work? What does that even mean? And over time, right, we learn about new technologies. There's the vendor flavor of the year, right? There's the new Gartner buzzword, and it is a struggle just to keep up. I taught my first cybersecurity class at SMU in 2015, and it was really a life-changing experience in a lot of ways. Being able to teach young students who still have a lot of energy and enthusiasm, right? I think it revitalized me in a lot of ways. But I realized, teaching from a book, the way that we teach things is a challenge sometimes, just in and of itself to introduce those concepts. But as I kind of re-reviewed all the material out there, man, there's a thing that we kind of talk about, generally in the world called making things foolproof, right? We can never make things foolproof. And that's what we're trying to do with technology, right? We're trying to engineer better and better technology so that, the humans can't mess it up. And I don't think that's a realistic approach for success. And, maybe there are better ways to do email, for example, that don't put people on the front lines, right? I'd love it if, why does anybody in the world need to email a brand new student at the university, right? Okay, we need to make sure their email address isn't disclosed and those kinds of things, but we're putting people right on the front lines. We've got to help them be prepared for success, whatever technology they use. And so that was really the focus of the approach, right? We're going to keep getting better and better at technology. That progression is going to happen, but we're not getting better as people. And we've heard for years that humans, they're not so good with technology because we can't apply all the lessons that we've learned throughout history to technology because it's invisible or whatever. And I think that we can. I think it is possible. And we've just got to apply those lessons and learn more about ourselves as humans to be able to apply the security lessons that we've learned over generations and millennia to technology. I think it's possible. But awesome question, yes.
Hey, George. Harvey Nuz. Good to see you again. I enjoy this presentation. As I always like to ask vendors once they make their presentation, what's on their roadmap? What's in your version 2 of this book or some of your other books after this that you've learned since you put this out? Is that a fair question?
That's an awesome question, Harvey. Love to see you. Thank you for that. So my last book came out in October of last year. It's called Project Zero Trust. So you're like, okay, wait, you went from security awareness to zero trust. How'd you do that? So really, what I think the most important part of zero trust is the people. Right? Oh my God, it's not a tool. It's not an architecture that will solve all our problems. It's really about the people, not just in security, but in all of IT and maybe in all of our organizations that help make zero trust possible. I think having a culture of zero trust, right? You've got to reinforce that. With tools, everyone from the help desk to your developers, to your identity team, to your network folks, to your cloud architects, right? We've got to recognize that a massive part of cybersecurity overall is about education, right? We've got to help those people be in a position to be able to do zero trust, culturally, organizationally, not just understanding the technical fundamentals. And so I'm so honored that it's actually been one of the top cybersecurity books of all of 2023. Been able to talk to lots of folks around the world about their success stories and their failures, and it's been really illuminating, particularly for Fortune 50 CISOs that have been like, man, I've gone through my zero trust journey 2 or 3 times and failed, and it's been about politics. It's not about whether we had the funding or not, or whether the right technology was there. I think that success really does boil down to people in our organizations, and it can't just be a magical unicorn organization that can do zero trust. I think it really is about delivering people and helping them build that culture of cybersecurity in our organization. So that's really what we're about. In terms of roadmap for well-aware security, we built a ton of training already, and we're just getting the word out there and building partners to be able to deliver that. So yeah, thank you for that, Harvey. Nick.
Yeah, quick question. I do fully agree with your approach. I do also believe that people are the weakest link, and they can also be the strongest link. I think 2 of them can be true at the same time. But again, just looking at the way of really thinking about it more broadly, how do you see the measurement of outcomes coming out of this, right? So your technology can kind of measure outcomes, but I think the struggle many CISOs or security leaders actually face is really trying to really make sense of the humanistic approach, as the other gentleman made, the point he made, really. How do you make sense of this? How do you measure in a way that it's truly compelling and perhaps a path forward for decision makers that want to probably invest on the human approach?
I love that, because so in the beginning, really the genesis of this was thinking about what the outcome for security awareness really ought to be, right? And it's not checking the box. It's behavior change. But you're right. How do we measure behavior change? I think that's a really important question. There are a couple of companies out there today that are helping kind of measure behavior change through like API integrations with your Microsoft stack, for example, and then they'll watch interactions, not just simulated phishing, but other areas. And I think those are important, but cool. Even if you do get the data, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to change your training programs to meet that data? I think about doing like A/B testing, right? So we don't do that in security awareness training much today, but which training is more effective, right? I know KnowBe4 is probably a lot of customers in the room. How do I know whether KnowBe4 is more effective or not than MediaPro or think about one of the many other competitors? I think it's a really hard question. but it's a hard question we should be asking. And in terms of metrics, we also need to be thinking about the downsides, right? So that was one of the big questions that my executives asked me when I started simulated phishing like 10 years ago. They were like, cool, well, you can do that. That makes sense, but don't do it in such a way that people stop responding to email. Don't do it in such a way that it negatively impacts our culture so that we don't respond to students in the same amount of time. Don't do it in such a way where you anger the employees. Like at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a publishing company. A lot of publishers had a negative impact because of the pandemic, and the security team wanted to trick everybody, and they sent a fake email saying in December saying, "Oh, you click here to get your bonuses." And the employees went online and they were like, "Hey, guess what? We got the simulated phishing message. We just laid off a ton of people, and we're not getting bonuses. But the security team thought it would be funny, so forget about it. I'm gonna quit this job because this publisher isn't worth working at." Right? We shouldn't just be measuring security relevant metrics. I think we need to help organizations understand the behavior of employees and influence security in the right ways that make sense. And so, hopefully the 9 habits are one way of doing that that maybe is compelling. Thank you. Got a couple more? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So I love what you did with the data here that you collected along the way, and I'm curious, since an organization has everyone from the janitor to the C-suite, did you think to take a crack at looking for what group or what level was, you could take it either way, the easiest to modify behavior or the hardest to modify behavior, and were you able to identify why a group was harder or easier depending on where they were in the structure of the company?
I love that question, and the short answer is we don't have enough data yet to really show that. That's one of the things that I want to focus on in our security awareness training. We do have in the cyber personality test, I've been able to kind of go through that and look at unique personality types for different roles, right? So for CISOs, we've published like, okay, here are the top 3 different personality types for a CISO, and that represents, something like, 60-70% of all the people that took the test. The problem is we got a lot of bad data. So it's free, it's open to the internet, and people will make up stuff and put it in there. So making sure that we validate and have good data before we come out with a result, I think is really important to me personally. So I think as we onboard more customers and do more in-depth analysis for them, I think we'll be able to get there. But I am definitely skeptical, and we definitely need to dive down into that extra level of detail. But so far in terms of demographics, we asked some of those questions, and there really hasn't been any one leading indicator of why someone changes their behavior more than others that we've been able to tell so far. Got one more. We're probably a little over time, so if we don't have time for your questions, feel free to find me later.
Yeah. Thank you, George, for that presentation. I just want to create, maybe I stand a chance to be corrected, but I still believe that humans are actually the weakest link in an organization. And at the same time, humans are also the strongest link. It all depends on where you position it. Because humans, we always interact with different systems to ensure that there's robust, defense of your organization's cyberspace. But this is my question. So how would you address that relationship between humans and technology to achieve the maximum outputs?
That's a great question, and it really makes me think a lot about AI. That is definitely the next generation, and people are already using it to become so much more effective. at doing lots of different kinds of jobs. So, I think really it's got to be about education. We have to have an open conversation about this. I think we're so busy as organizations, right? We're very focused on just getting the widget out the door, whatever the widget is. But I think taking a step back and helping people really become comfortable with technology, to figure out how to enable them to do an even better job that's still cyber secure, but it's also ethically approaching the issues that we have today, like privacy. I think, again, we're always going to have this new funnel of technology that's coming in. We're always going to have to be adapting. And I think in cybersecurity, right, we're always going to be on the bleeding edge, right? We're embracing that in ways that other parts of our organization don't. So helping them find that bridge, right? Change is really, really scary. And I think, again, that's one of the reasons that we took the approach with Well Aware, focusing on wellness, was to help make it more approachable, to reach out to them, to say, you know what, like, look, there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. Let's find how you can be better, more secure in your life. And I think that's the same approach that we need to take with all of technology, right? How do we set you up for success? I like to ask the question, instead of focusing on what could go wrong, which we tend to focus a lot on in security, how do we focus on what must go right? And that really, just changing the mindset, I think is a massive step towards improving our future. But I think that's all the time I have. So thank you all so much for the questions.